Attack on Pearl Harbor. On the quiet Sunday morning of December 7, 1941, the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, awoke to waves of Japanese aircraft, 353 in total, descending upon the harbor and unleashing a devastating onslaught of torpedoes. The attack was orchestrated by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who planned it as a preemptive strike on the Pacific Fleet in order to prevent the United States from interfering with Japan's plans in World War II. The USS Arizona, one of 8 battleships present, suffered a catastrophic explosion after a direct hit, sinking in less than 9 minutes and taking over 1,100 sailors with it. Meanwhile, the USS Oklahoma capsized after being struck multiple times, trapping hundreds of crew members inside its hull. In total, 2,403 Americans perished, the vast majority of which were junior enlisted personnel around 17 to 18 years old. The day after the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his iconic Day of Infamy speech, urging a formal declaration of war against the Empire of Japan, thereby marking the Pearl Harbor attack as the catalyst for the United States' entry into World War II. The attack is considered Hawaii's deadliest event and was the deadliest foreign attack on the U.S. until the Twin Towers fell in 2001. 9/11. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the world watched in horror as the deadliest terrorist attack in human history unfolded. American Airlines Flight 11, hijacked by 5 terrorists, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Just 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower, igniting a massive fireball visible for miles. As panic spread, another hijacked plane slammed into the Pentagon, killing 125 people inside the building. A 4th plane was headed for the White House, but after passengers who were alerted of the previous attacks fought back against the hijackers, it crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives that day, including first responders who rushed into the collapsing towers to save others. The United States formally responded by launching the War on Terror and invading Afghanistan to depose the Taliban, and after an entire decade, the mastermind behind the attacks was found and killed. D-Day. Before dawn on June 6, 1944, troops from the Allied forces of World War II seized the beaches of Normandy in the largest amphibious invasion in history. At the time, France was occupied by the armies of Nazi Germany, and the assault, codenamed Operation Overlord, landed roughly 156,000 Allied soldiers on Normandy's 5 beachheads: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The Normandy landings were chaotic and bloody, particularly in Omaha, where troops leapt from their landing boats and were pinned down for hours by murderous machine gun fire that turned the beach into a vast killing field. U.S. forces faced fierce German resistance and terrible weather conditions, leading to the deaths of 2,501 American soldiers. By the end of the day, 4,427 Allied soldiers were confirmed dead. However, the Allies overcame those grave initial setbacks and established a foothold in Nazi-occupied France, claiming all 5 of the beaches by nightfall. A month later, all of northern France had been liberated, and in spring of 1945, the Allies had defeated the Germans, marking the end of Nazi Germany. Bhopal Disaster. On December 2, 1984, at a Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, water accidentally entered a tank containing ample amounts of methyl isocyanate and triggered an uncontrollable chemical reaction. The pressure gauge on the tank surged to 10 psi, 8 psi above the norm, but 2 different senior refinery employees assumed the reading was instrument malfunction and subsequently ignored it. Later, when employees began to feel the effects of the gas leak, they found that the tank had climbed to a whopping 55 psi. An employee triggered the plant's alarm system, and it sounded briefly, but was quickly disabled by another employee, as per company procedure meant to avoid alerting the public around the factory over inconsequential leaks. Emergency toxic gas venting protocols were initiated, but 40 tons of methyl isocyanate was released into the atmosphere and blown southeast over Bhopal. The public was only made aware of the disaster by the gas cloud itself, and upwards of 500,000 people were exposed to its toxicity. The following morning, over 5,000 people had been pronounced dead as a result of the disaster, and those that survived suffered from blindness, cancer, and loss of livelihood. None of the company officials were convicted, despite evidence suggesting that they had shut down essential safety components of the plant to cut costs. Titanic. On the night of April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic, the world's largest and most luxurious ocean liner, was sailing through the icy waters of the North Atlantic when it received 6 warnings of iceberg-laden water on the horizon. The warnings went unheeded, and it collided with a massive iceberg, tearing a 300-foot gash along its starboard side. 6 of the 16 watertight compartments flooded, 2 more than it was designed to handle, and the supposedly unsinkable ship was rapidly filled with freezing cold water and began to topple over. Despite carrying 2,224 people, there were only enough lifeboats for about half of them, and among the panic, the lifeboats were set out before they were completely filled. The ship eventually split in 2 and disappeared beneath the waves, plunging more than 12,000 feet to the ocean floor. Almost all of the 1,500 or so souls who ended up in the water died within minutes due to the effects of cold shock and incapacitation. The RMS Carpathia arrived about an hour and a half after the sinking and rescued all of the 710 survivors, but the shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean floor remains a haunting reminder of that tragic day. Hiroshima. On the morning of August 6, 1945, the people of Hiroshima, Japan, carried on with their daily routines, unaware that their city was about to become the site of the first nuclear attack in history. The U.S. B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy over the city's center, and within seconds, a blinding flash lit up the sky, followed by a massive fireball that reached temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. The explosion unleashed energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT, flattening 5 square miles and instantly killing an estimated 66,000 people, though the final death toll was upwards of 140,000. One famous anonymous Hiroshima victim sitting on stone steps 850 feet from the hypocenter left a permanent shadow, having absorbed the fireball heat that permanently bleached the surrounding stone. Thousands more were burned beyond recognition, and survivor accounts describe aimlessly wandering through the ruins of the city, hearing the cries of people trapped within crushed structures. Nagasaki. Just 3 days after Hiroshima's destruction, the B-29 bomber boxcar dropped an atomic bomb nicknamed Fat Man on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. Although the bomb exploded with a force of 21,000 tons of TNT, more powerful than the one used on Hiroshima, its effects were confined by the hillsides of the narrow Urakami Valley, and the overall destruction was limited. Regardless of these circumstances, nearly 40,000 people died instantly. The majority of those that were heavily affected by the blasts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki but didn't immediately perish died roughly 2 to 4 months later due to radiation exposure and resulting complications. In a radio address on August 15th, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his country's unconditional surrender, citing the devastating power of a new and most cruel bomb, effectively ending World War II. Had he not made this radio address, the U.S. forces would have dropped a third, even more deadly bomb on August 19th. 2010 Haiti Earthquake. On January 12, 2010, a catastrophic 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck Haiti, and within 24 hours, an estimate of 100,000 people perished, though the Haitian government estimated that the death count was more than 300,000. The morgues were overwhelmed and had to bury the bodies in mass graves, and millions of survivors were displaced with close to 250,000 residences damaged beyond repair. Rescue efforts were heavily delayed due to the destruction of the capital's airport and seaport, and the collapse of the communication systems and other facilities led to air traffic congestion that served as another obstacle for the incoming aid. In the nights following the earthquake, many Haitian citizens slept in the streets, in their cars, or in makeshift shacks because their houses had been destroyed. Months after the earthquake subsided, the situation was still classified as an emergency, with 1 million people on the island living in tents, suffering from a cholera epidemic that began in October that claimed over 3,300 more lives. Despite global relief efforts and billions of dollars spent, Haiti is still feeling the effects of the catastrophe over a decade later. Bhola Cyclone. The Bhola Cyclone is the deadliest tropical cyclone on record, and also one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern history. It struck Bangladesh on the night of November 12, 1970, and made landfall with wind speeds of 115 miles per hour, generating a storm surge that submerged entire villages. Within a single day, an estimated 300,000 to 500,000 people lost their lives, and hundreds of homes throughout the entire region were decimated. In some of the country's offshore islands, 45% of the population was wiped out, and it was determined that more than half of the victims were children under the age of 10. When the storm calmed down, medical relief surveys were carried out to determine the medical needs of the surviving population. A phenomenon dubbed cyclone syndrome was observed, where survivors exhibited severe abrasions on the limbs caused by them clinging to trees to withstand the storm.